Hello and welcome to the Vegas Young Show. The premise of this show is very simple. It's all things Vegas. Tastemakers, headliners, insiders, Vegas stories and culture. And yes, there's a lot of culture here in Las Vegas. So what we're about to see is the first in a two-part episode of our show with Rich Little. So, without further ado.
My guest, Rich Little, author of People I've Known and Been, Little by Little. I've been reading this book. Fascinating stuff in there.
My gosh, Rich Little, is he still alive?
Do you get that a lot?
Oh my gosh, that's that guy we used to see on TV back in the 70s, did all those variety shows. Hey, he looks pretty good for his age. I wonder how old he is. I get that all the time. You know what? Age is not important. You're only as old as the girls you feel.
You still got it. So that clip we just watched, what do you think when you look at that? It's a memory lane for you, I imagine.
Yeah, well, one of the great things about my career that I think about a lot is the people I've met and worked with. You know, when I was a young kid growing up in Ottawa, Canada, I mean, I had my idols and people I admired, and to think within 10 or 12 years forward from that time, I would not only meet them, but work with a lot of them, and that was a big thrill for me to work with Orson Welles and you know, so much Judy Garland and Frank Sinatra, George Burns, you know, Lucille Ball, and all these wonderful people that I admired, and there I was, this kid from Canada, working with these giants, you know. And when I look at the old roasts, I was in my early 20s, and most of them are gone, actually, of that era. You know, that was a long time ago, and you know, I look back on that and think, I think Ruth Buzzy and I are the only two that are alive that did those roasts. I did 24 of them, 24 Dean Martin roasts. I think I did more than anybody, and then Don Rickles was probably second, and that was a great time for me. A young kid from Canada,
Yeah,
not only doing the roast with Dean, but working with all these great stars. Wonderful.
Did you befriend any of them? Did they become personal to you?
Not really. No, I haven't had too many show business people as personal friends. Robert Goulet was a great friend of mine. I saw a lot of Bob, and I knew Stewart Granger, the swashbuckler from the 50s. When I lived in Malibu, he lived just down the road, and I used to see him a lot. Howard Keel, I knew him very well, wonderful man. And but I wasn't that close to a lot of the celebrities. You know, you'd see them on the roasts or on a show I would do, and then, you know, they go their separate ways. I think that's true with a lot of actors that work in movies. They become very friendly with the people in the cast, and, oh, we're going to get together, we're going to make another movie together, and then somehow they never see each other again, you know.
Like summer camp.
Yeah.
Has that kind of feel to it, I imagine.
Yeah.
Robert Goulet, you speak very fondly of him in the book. He was somebody that had an impact on your life, I think.
Yeah, well, he was like a big kid. He liked to clown around a lot, and used to punch people. He had to be careful with that, but and he would go into the audience, and if you were smoking, he'd just take the cigarettes out of their mouth and throw it on the floor, and you know, he was kind of outrageous, but he was like a big kid. He really was. But what a talent! What a voice he had!
There was a story where he punched the wrong person in the audience.
Yeah, well, as I say, he used to wander around in the audience singing and punching people, and he said, I punched this one guy, and boy, he looked angry, and I don't know what his problem was. I was just joking, and so when he came backstage, he said, that guy really looked angry, and I said, well, he should. That was George Foreman.
I also the part about Orson Welles really struck me. I mean, he's known as one of the most brilliant people in cinema.
Yeah.
And you got to do a movie with him, one that was not released for many years, only recently saw the light.
And I'm not in it.
Why was that?
Well, it was shot outside of Phoenix, and I only had 3 weeks to shoot the movie, and then I had club commitments. And I told Orson when I started the movie, I have to leave at a certain date or I'll be sued. And of course, typical of Orson Welles, everything got behind schedule, and I ended up having to leave. And I was embarrassed, and I didn't want to, but I didn't want to get sued, and so I left the movie. And then Peter Bogdanovich came in and reshot all my scenes. So he's in the movie, and I'm not in the movie, unfortunately. But it was a wonderful experience for me working with Orson Welles. So, oh my gosh, the stories and the things that happened with him.
Nothing he did was traditional.
No.
Like at times he would just yell things at you like midgets. What was that about?
Oh, yeah. We'd shoot a scene, and we'd do our dialogue, and everything would go according to the script. And then all of a sudden, Orson would yell out, "Everyone look on the roof. Look up. Midgets on the roof." What? Midgets on the roof. Look up. So we'd look up and go, "I don't see any midgets." Or "Midgets running between your legs." We'd look down, go like, "Oh, God." And then I'd say to Orson, "What was that all about?" He said, "We'll put them in later in Spain." So I'd love to see this movie and figure out if there were midgets in it or not, you know?
I saw it. I saw no midgets.
You didn't see any midgets?
I didn't see any midgets. He never got around to it.
Maybe he never got back to Spain and couldn't find any midgets, but he would do strange things. But the interesting thing about Orson was he would listen to everybody. You know, if anybody had a suggestion, even one of the grips came up with an idea, you know, he would listen to them. And he was very flexible. And, you know, he'd sit in his chair and direct, and then he'd want to get up and show us how to do something. And we said, "Don't get up, don't get up, don't get up." It takes 5 minutes for him to get out of the chair, you know. He used to wander around with his sneakers on, and the shoelaces were hanging because he couldn't reach down and tie up his shoes. And then he would prop himself up in bed at night and rewrite the script. I don't think he slept.
Yeah, and the script changed day to day.
Day to day, the script changed, and nobody had any idea of what we were doing or what the plot was. And because it would change all the time. And then there's that wonderful story in there where John Huston, who was in the movie, the great director John Huston, and we would go to Denny's and have lunch. And Orson would kind of wedge himself in to one of the seats behind the counter, and we'd have lunch. And we did that a number of times. And then because of my exposure on television, I was on TV a lot in those days. A lady recognized me, and she was a big fan, and she came over to the table, and she said, "Mr. Little, can I have your autograph?" I said, "Really?" "Yes, I just love your autograph." "Oh, of course." So I took my time, you know. And "What's your name?" and everything, and I wrote down to Gloria, best wishes, and I'm taking my time because she was ignoring John Huston and Orson Welles. And as she's kneeling down and I'm signing this, she says to me in a loud voice, "Who's your fat friend?" Meaning Orson Welles, you know.
Yeah.
And John Huston says, without missing a beat, "We don't know. We found the poor devil out on the highway. He looked undernourished, so we brought him in here, gave him a cherry Coke and some fries. We're going to fatten him up and send him on his way." And Orson said, "Thank you, kind sir."
He had a pretty good sense of humor,
Yeah.
considering.
And the other thing was that we would do a scene where we were driving in the car, and John Huston would be driving. Orson would be wedged into the back of the car. Took him about 10 minutes to get in there, holding a handheld camera. and shooting this scene. And as we're driving through a residential area of Phoenix, John Huston said, you know, I've never learned to drive a car. I've never driven a car before. We went, what? And at this point, we're going through people's backyards and through their hedges and missing a tree, and it was unbelievable. And Orson kept saying, you know, keep going, keep going. And I'm doing the dialogue and everything, and we're just driving through backyards and everything. And then we finally came to a canal, and I thought, we're going to go right in the canal. And Orson said, well, if we drown on the canal, you'll get billing. It'll be Orson Welles and John Huston and Rich Little were drowned in this canal. And I said, well, I get third billing, you'll get third billing. So anyway, we didn't go in the canal, but we did drive through some backyards, and it's amazing. John Huston never learned to drive a car.
Yeah, in fact, you decided to drive at that point just for fear that you would die, right?
Oh yeah, I was afraid because you know, he was driving so recklessly, and Orson the whole time was shooting all this as if nothing was happening in the world. He kept said, keep the dialogue going.
Yeah.
You know, I was terrified. But
So-
he was great because, you know, we'd have lunch together, and they'd always talk about some actor, and it was fascinating listening to those two guys talk about, you know.
Well, they were best of friends, and
Oh, they
many
were
speculate
very
that he
close.
only did this movie to keep the people that he loved together.
Yeah.
So that he had a place to commune with them, I
Yeah,
guess.
he had, in The Other Side of the Wind, he had Edmund O'Brien and Susan Strasberg and some wonderful actors. And he had started shooting the movie 3 years earlier in Spain, and then he was picking it up outside of Phoenix, and it was just released recently. And I still don't know what it's about.
I don't think anybody does. That's part of the narrative of it, is that it just, he had a vision of some sort that only he shared with himself. So nobody else really knew really
There
what
were
it
a
was.
lot of projects that Orson did that he never finished,
Yeah.
you know.
In fact, so there was a show called Copycats
Yeah.
back in the day, and everybody
That's right.
went through there. In fact, we're at HMPE studio right now, which is Debbie Reynolds. She had the Debbie Reynolds Museum at one point, and many of that, the memorabilia is here. And so we're kind of surrounded by some of that. She was on that show with you, right?
Who, Debbie?
Yes.
Yes, she was. She was wonderful. And, you know, Debbie was a very good impersonator. And I think one of the best, actually. And she did a great Pearl Bailey and Barbara Streisand. Of course, Betty Davis. She worked with Betty Davis, you know. And when you work with somebody and you're around them all the time, your impression can improve because you know them so well, you know. And I think Debbie got to know, you know, Betty Davis quite well.
Yeah.
So her impersonation of her was spot on. I mean, it was absolutely perfect. I don't know what Betty Davis thought of it, but, you know.
Well, they were friends later in life, I was told. So.
Well, a lot of people did Betty Davis, you know.
Yeah. That brings up a topic. So, you know, people like John Wayne and Betty Davis, they had such interesting quirks, and they were very interesting characters just in life, which made them, I think, more iconic and easier to do an impression of. When you think of current stars, they're not quite as quirky. They're not quite as identifiable. Why do you think that is?
Well, you know, I mean, the stars of the 40s were all larger than life, and they're always the same. John Wayne was always John Wayne, and Clark Gable was Clark Gable, and so it's easier to impersonate them. Actors today play different parts, and you know, like Dustin Hoffman isn't the same in every movie he does. He's different, you know. But those actors were always, you know, the same. Even Clark Gable, when he did Gone with the Wind, you know, he should have been Southern, I guess, but he didn't have an accent, and he wasn't going to do one, you know. And So they were easier to impersonate, but today it's a lot tougher today to do. You know,
We're going to talk a little bit about the future of what you have in store. One of those being a reality show where you're going to look for people who do impressions. And
well, I think it's a wonderful idea. I thought about it about 10 years ago. You know, and to have a show, America's Next Impersonator, or and bring on people that can do impressions, because I found out over the years in traveling across the country that everywhere I'd go, there would be somebody doing an impression for me, you know, and sometimes little kids would do an impression of John Wayne or Jimmy Stewart, and that's kind of funny, or older people would do an impression. I always thought that was funny, and then I thought, if we could do a show and bring on people to do impressions, and there's so many. It could be not only entertaining if they did it well, but you could make it funny, because you could have a 90-year-old woman, you know, doing her John Wayne impression, be funny, or a little 7-year-old kid. You know, there's a lot of people that do impressions. Some of them are pretty good too. Yeah. You know, sometimes people come up to me and do an impression. I don't even know who they're doing. You know, you have to be polite. And you say, "Oh, that was pretty good, Jimmy Stewart." "No, I was doing Walter Brennan." oh, I'm sorry.
well, a little bit later, I'm going to do my best impression for you. I want you to
What's
critique me. I was going to do Jack Nicholson. I know you do him as well, so who better to ask than... You think now's the time? All right, so do you mind if I
Well, no. You
get
need
your
you need the
impressions of
glasses?
my impression, I guess?
Do you need the glasses?
I need the glasses, though. I don't have... Let me...
Well, you know, Jack,
Very specific glasses he has.
we don't have the dark glasses.
Yeah, well, let's see.
That's all right.
I could... Wow, Todd, I could see the future. This went very well, based on what I'm seeing. All right, so... let me get into my character here. Well, Rich, I understand that you have a little show down at the Tropicana. I think I might stop by and check it out. What do you think?
Not bad.
Huh?
Not bad. Not bad.
Okay.
Does he get to come on to the next show, or is he done?
Oh, yeah, here we go.
Oh, no.
Oh, let's try that
This will
again.
leave me better.
Oh, I feel much better now.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what.
How about those Lakers?
Oh, I love the Lakers. You know that. Now that the Black Mamba's gone, I don't know what I'm going to do. So, all right, so tell me. What did I do wrong?
But his turn.
I thought it was pretty good, you know.
All right.
You know, there's a guy over at Fox News. His name is Juan Williams. You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah.
The guy's a pilot, right? The other day, he flies his plane over the Capitol building while Congress was in session. And the headline in the USA Today read, "Juan flew over the cuckoo's nest."
That's Rich Little for you. Right there.
Well, you know what I mean? Sometimes when the voice is not that great, if the joke's good, you know, it'll carry it, you know.
Yeah.
And vice versa, you know. Sometimes, I remember when I first started doing impressions, as soon as I started to do it and people recognized it and knew I was doing them fairly well, they would applaud. Well, then you go on and do the next one.
Right.
But after a while, you had to be aware that you don't have any material, you know. You're just doing the voice and they're applauding. And then you had to have a joke, you know, or something to say. So then that's when I realized you had to be a comedian and you know, and do something funny, you know, unless you're doing a dramatic bit. I've done that over the years too.
Well, you're more of a traditional impressionist. There is different types, though.
I'm an impersonator more than an impressionist.
Okay.
I think of an impressionist as somebody who gives their impression of somebody, which can be exaggerated, you know.
Dana Carvey's a good example.
That's my impression. But an impersonation, I think, is more of an exact, you know, copy of them. And I'm more of an impersonator. an impression. I don't exaggerate it much at all, you know.
Yeah. In your show, you have a little fun with Nixon. I think you take that. He is such a character, though.
Well, the thing about Nixon was he had no sense of humor, and he wore that same black or that dark suit, you know, all the time, and he never took the hanger out of it. You know, he was very stiff, and I've always wanted to do Nixon in a movie, but they always used to think of me, well, he's a comedian. We want an actor, you know.
Yeah.
So I miss out playing Nixon or Ronald Reagan because they think of me as a comic, not as an actor. And so I missed out in a lot of parts. But I would love to do something with Nixon that would be serious.
I think there's a lot more to that story.
Richard Nixon was never say anything bad about a man until you've walked a mile in his shoes. By then, you'll be a mile away. You'll have his shoes. Then you can say any damn thing you want.
You mentioned earlier that the more you're around somebody, the better the impression can become. Ronald Reagan, you visited the White House a dozen times.
Yeah, I got to know him personally,
Yeah.
and that always helps, you know, the impression. Like I said with Debbie Reynolds and you know, Betty Davis. Yeah, I spent a lot of time with Reagan, and I was even invited up to their quarters at the White House, and for tea, you know. And Reagan had a wonderful sense of humor, though. Oh my God, he loved to tell corny jokes, and the cornier they were, the better, you know. I remember one he liked. I said, you know, we're always looking for new sources of energy. And, of course, the greatest source of energy is the sun. So we've decided to build a pipeline to the sun and extract that pure energy and bring it back to Earth. And a reporter said, what? You can't do that. Build a pipeline to the sun, you'd be burned up before you got it halfway there. Yes, we realize that. And we're going to build it at night. Now, he loved that. He absolutely loved that because it was so corny, right? And I remember another time at the White House, Reagan was doing impressions for me. And he did his Jimmy Stewart, you know, which was typical Jimmy Stewart, wah, 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 gee whiz, you know. And he did a John Wayne that was fair. He did Truman Capote for me.
Okay.
Reagan did Truman Capote, and it wasn't bad, you know. And he would kind of do Truman Capote, you know, and he'd kind of rub his eye and, you know, talk to, as Truman Capote did. But he said to me, I don't know what to say. I don't have a joke. And I said, well, Mr. President, I can give you a joke. He said, you do that? I said, of course. Well, what is it? He said, wait a second. And he got a Secret Service man, and they got a piece of paper, and started to write the joke out on the guy's back. He said, what is it? I said, well, this is Truman Capote. You know, a lot of people think that I wrote in cold blood, but that's not true. Actually, I wrote in ink. And he thought that was absolutely hysterical. He's writing this down in the back, and he's laughing so hard, he could hardly make out what he's writing. And then he took the piece of paper, folded it, put it in his pocket, and said to me, I'm going to try that out on Gorbachev.
Oh, jeez.
And I thought to myself, he's going to go Truman Capote for Gorbachev? That I would give a year's salary to see that.
Yeah.
That would be hysterical. Could you imagine?
I'm
him
thinking
doing
about
that and Gorbachev going, cold blood, you know.
Do you feel he was serious?
He was serious, yeah.
I'm thinking about the temperature of the world at that time and everything that was happening and how powerful of a man in that scenario. That's the type of relationship he had with Gorbachev, though.
I guess. I don't know whether Gorbachev had a sense of humor, you know. I mean, who the heck knows, you know. But he put that in his pocket, and I'm sure he told it at various functions he'd go to. He loved to tell jokes, and he loved to be funny. And you know, he said to me one time, he said, "You know, Rich, you do me better than I do. I think you should be president. And you do me so good. I was thinking when I pass away, they should bury you." And that's why I never went to the funeral.
Rich Little, we're going to be back in a minute. We're going to talk about your residency here in Las Vegas at the Tropicana and a few other things when we're back.
If you want hot food and good food in Vegas, Vicky's Diner.
Okay, I'm going to try it again.
You know what would be even better?
If I shut up.
These are the best pancakes I ever ate in my whole life, and I'm 67 years old, and I'm telling you that I have never eaten better pancakes than this.
We're back with Rich Little. Rich, when was the first time you became aware of Las Vegas and decided to play here?
I came up here after I did the Judy Garland show. And
That would have been your first...
that was my first U.S. show, and did a lot for my career because everybody watched the Garland show, and the routine I did on there seemed to go over pretty well. So I got a lot of bookings right after that. And that's when I came up to Vegas. And, you know, I remember driving up here in a sandstorm. And, I mean, there was nothing here. I mean, hardly anything. Just desert and a Wayne Newton sign. That was all there was, you know. But I remember going to the Sands was the first hotel I went to. And then I ended up performing there. And I met... who did I meet? A couple of Don Adams. Do you remember Don Adams?
Get Smart.
Get Smart.
Yeah.
And he was there, and apparently he owed the Sands a lot of money because he was gambling all the time, and they were into him for I don't know $100,000. So he was performing for nothing.
Not too good for your health in those days.
And I remember
the money.
meeting him when I arrived at the Sands, and within 30 to 40 minutes, he'd blown another $20,000. So, you know, there were a lot of performers in those days that owed money, and they had to pay it off by performing. And so they just lived there, you know. That's when I decided, when I saw that, I'm not going to gamble. No way. And I never did when I saw that.
You live here now.
I live here now.
How long you been living here?
Oh, I've lived here since the 60s, you know. And Vegas is a wonderful little city, you know, if they ever get it finished. It's, what do they say? Vegas is a city of constitution, institution, and prosperity.
Very good.
But I came here in the 60s, and I performed with Jack Jones. Was my first engagement at the Sands Hotel.
Tell us what that was like. What would an
That was
audience
terrific
person,
for me.
what would they walk into? What would they see? What was the atmosphere?
Well, I mean, Jack Jones was very popular at that time. He was at the height of his career, and I was the opening act. And we did a week, and I remember Jack and Trotta, who was, you know, there with the Rat Pack. The Rat Pack had just sort of folded about that time. I never really saw them. It was just after the Rat Pack.
Okay.
But Jack and Trotta was the booker at the Sands, and he booked Jack Jones and I to do a week at the, we ended up doing 2 weeks. We did so well. And then at the end of 2 weeks, he said, we're held over another night. And we said, oh, great, going to be packed. They didn't tell me it was a German audience. There was an entirely German audience. They didn't speak any English. They didn't tell me that, right? But there was a little joke they had going. They wanted to see me die. So Jack Jones comes on, and he's a singer, and they probably knew most of his songs, whether they spoke English or not. But when I came on at first, I bombed. And they were all in the wings laughing and joking, and they thought it was hysterical. And I got no reaction at all because they didn't tell me it was an all-German audience. If I'd known that, maybe I could have done my Kurt Jürgens impression or my Eric von Stroheim or Marlene Dietrich, but they had no idea what I was doing. That was my big opening in Vegas. And then after that, I ended up performing in almost every hotel in Vegas at one time or another. And it's at the MGM, and I was at the Riviera for years. And there were great times back then, people dressed up, and it was a big event to go and see a show. Today, people are in shorts and tank tops,
Yeah.
It's a whole different atmosphere now. It's more for families, but in those days, to see a show in Vegas was a big deal. And I have a menu at home of a show at the Desert Inn that was 1956, and I have this menu at home. It's hysterical to look at it. A steak was like $1.
Wow.
Shrimp cocktail was like 15 cents,
Yeah.
and the show was nothing. So you could have a dinner, see Frank Sinatra, and have a complete dinner for about $20.
Incredible. And there were times when there was more orchestra members on the stage than there was people in the audience. How did they even
I
make it?
work with a 25-piece orchestra.
That's something big that's changed about Vegas.
Oh yeah. Now I've just got one guy on a keyboard,
Yeah.
and so everybody had to economize and save money. And boy, those were great days when you go out and I do a singing medley and do my singing impressions and have a 25-piece orchestra behind me.
Yeah.
Wow, those days are gone.
Yeah. You mentioned that once before, and it's something I hadn't thought of. It really does add and lend to the production when you have a live band, especially those musicians were the best in the world.
Well, it makes the impression better too, because of the sound.
Yeah, people to bounce off if you want to talk.
Oh yeah.
Is that something you'd love to get back to?
What?
Could that be done today in Las Vegas?
No, because it would cost too much money. That's why they eventually brought in tracks and get away with the orchestras, to save money.
Well, Todd made a point when we were talking about it earlier. Back then, they were laundering money. They didn't care what it cost. They were filtering money through, and that's part of what paid for all of that.
That's true too. Yeah.
And then corporations.
I never saw any of that. I was told when I played the Desert Inn, and when I was booked in there, I played the Desert Inn a lot, and there was a guy who was the booker. His name was Walter Kane, and he worked for Howard Hughes. I think he was his pimp at one time, and he became the booker at the Desert Inn. And I remember finishing a show one night, and Walter came up to me and said, "The old man thought you were great tonight." I said, "Well, what does that mean? What old man?" He said, "Hughes." I said, "Howard Hughes?" He said, "Yeah. He watches the show up in the penthouse. He has a feed up there.
Oh.
And he watches you every night. And he thought you were really good tonight. He just wanted me to tell you that he thought you were the best tonight than he's seen you in the last 2 weeks." And I went, "Wow, that's it." I never met him.
Few people did at that point.
Well, I might have met him, maybe thinking he was a gardener. I don't know, But that's interesting. The old man loved the show, and Walter's watching it up in the penthouse. Yeah.
The elbows that you rubbed. Rickles. The Rat Pack.
Rickles was... There was nobody like Rickles.
Yeah.
Rickles had an interesting mind. Not most, but if you're a good comedian, as you're talking, you're kind of thinking what you're going to say next, you know, so that, you know, keep the flow going. Rickles could be 2 or 3 thoughts ahead. As he's saying something, he not only knows what he's going to say next, but beyond that. And he had a great ability to just, that mind of his. And then it was so sad near the end of his life that, like it happens to a lot of people, that mind was going. And that was kind of sad because Rickles had the sharpest mind.
Yeah.
And so did Robin Williams. I mean, those guys were way beyond any other comedians. You know, and you never saw Rickles at a loss. I think the only time Rickles was at a loss, do you remember when he broke Johnny's ashtray on the show?
And Johnny
went in to where he was filming
taping next door. Yeah.
And said, "Yeah, you broke my ashtray. So look at it." And Rickles broke up and he was speechless. He didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
It's the only time I ever saw Don where he didn't have a comeback.
Yeah, and then Carson threw him in the...
And Johnny said, "You're going to pay for this ashtray. This is not acceptable."
Yeah.
And that was the only time I saw Don. But he would attack me, but he didn't go after me, you know, much.
You mentioned once before he was really a sweet guy.
Oh, he was a very nice guy.
I mean,
Yeah.
given his act, you wouldn't think it, but he was really quite generous and kind.
Yeah.
And a family
I remember
man.
the last time I saw him, he was at the Orleans. I went backstage, and he was very nice and everything, but, you know, you could tell he wasn't quite as sharp as he was. And he said, "Rich, can we talk intimately?" And I thought, "Yeah, come here." And I got close to him and I said, "Yeah, what is it, Don?" He said, "I like what you're doing to your hair." I said, "What?" "Your hair looks good. I just want to tell you that keep it like that." That was it.
You meant it.
And then I looked at him and I didn't know what the hell to say. And I said, "Well, your hair looks pretty good too, Don." And of course he was bald.
Yeah.
Don't get smart with me. But anyway, this very intimate conversation was about my hair.
Interesting. I want to shift gears a little bit. There's been nothing controversial in your career that I can find anywhere. You're the one celebrity that somehow weaved through all of your career without so much as a blip.
Well, I don't know about that. There were a few things I don't like to talk about, but
Well,
I
nothing.
went with a magician by the name of Melinda, and that turned out badly.
Okay.
But we won't go into that. But
All right.
luckily you didn't read up on that.
I did not.
But
How about starlets? Did you ever date somebody?
never
that was-
dated a starlet.
Anybody in the industry?
No. That's why when I wrote my book, you know, I never talked about my personal life because it wasn't that interesting, you know.
So, how was it that you sidestepped a lot of these things that normally happen with stars?
Well, I was never a drinker, and I
Okay.
never gambled because of, you know, what happened to, what's his name? Don,
Don, from Get Smart.
Get
Help me.
Smart.
Don Adams, thank you.
Don Adams.
Would you
Um,
believe?
Hmm?
Would you believe? That was his line, right?
I can't believe you can't remember my name. No, I never was a drinker, and I never gambled, and I kept, you know, pretty good care of myself, and you know, I swim every day, and you know, I work on my act, and try to keep it contemporary, and do a few living people. You know, I don't want the audience to think that my act is deceased, you know, which it basically is, but you know, I'm appealing to older people that knew all these people. I mean, you got a bunch of young people coming along now. They don't know who Dean Martin is. They don't know who Frank Sinatra is, or Bing Crosby, or John Wayne. They have no clue, you know. So when they come to my show, they're probably, if they're laughing at the joke because they don't know who I'm impersonating. I had a 15-year-old come and see me a couple of months ago, sat in the front row, and I thought, he's not going to know anybody. And the kid was laughing his head off. I mean, really laughing, and I kind of threw me. So when the show was over, I beckoned him over and I said, God, you seem to enjoy the show. Mr. Little, you're hysterical. I just thought it was great. But I was kind of confused, though, as you were performing. I said, you were confused about what? He said, I just kept wondering why you kept changing your voice.
Just like the material.
Yeah.
That's funny.
No idea who. Yeah.
But
He said to me, I like the bit with the drunken guy that you did. That was funny. That was Dean Martin, the drunken guy, you know?
so much. That's so funny. Well, you know, in the research though, I found that you were mentioned on Family Guy. They do a whole segment and a bit where they're hearing a guy that's doing Reagan, I think it is, and they're going, "It's probably Rich Little. It's not even the real Reagan," that kind of thing. So they reference you. I saw on Futurama.
Yeah.
You were featured on there, right?
That's right.
Was it as yourself?
Basically, yeah.
They preserved your head.
They just showed my head.
Yes.
Right in a jar. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where my head really should be,
Yeah.
to tell you the truth. But yeah, that was fun to do that. I did Nixon in a jar.
I think there's a lot of these shows that refer to many of the characters that you do. So there's a whole audience of people that know these characters. They might not know the significance of them historically, but I think they're aware of them more than you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Which is why I think the idea of having your own show where you find this talent and then you mentor them to some extent and help them develop their act. I think
Well,
that's
there's
a
an
great
awful
notion.
lot of people out there that do great impressions that, will never be famous. But if we did a show, America's Got, impersonators or the next great impressionists or something like that, we could show a lot of these people, and some of them would be funny and some would be pretty darn talented. And I think it would make a great show. I really do.
Well, we're going to jumpstart it a little bit. We're going to ask our audience to send in a clip of themselves doing impressions, and we're going to look through those clips together. You, myself, and Todd Fisher, who we're going to have here in a moment after the break. He's going to come in, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it. But they're going to send in their 30-second clip of their best impression. We're
Great.
going to look at it. If we use it on this show, they're going to win something nice, and the best of the best is actually going to be able to perform with you on your stage.
Wow. That'd be great.
Let's do this.
Yeah.